My fiancé told my 14-year-old sister she was hot, then laughed when I confronted him. I just let him laugh and packed our bags in silence. He never saw it coming. The sound of the zipper sliding shut was the only noise in the room. My fingers trembled slightly as I pressed the suitcase down, forcing it closed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just packed. It was 3:27 in the morning when I made my final decision. The room smelled like lavender and laundry detergent, the sense of comfort. But they couldn't cover the stench of something rotten that had crept into my life. I'd loved Charles. I'd trusted him. For 2 years, he'd been my future. We were engaged. We were supposed to be planning a wedding. Instead, I was planning my quiet escape. I had memorized the way the hardwood creaked near the door, so I stepped lightly, barefoot, careful. My heart pounded, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't scared of what he might do. I was scared of what he already had done. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't come in a fight or a violent act. It came in whispers, in glances, in the way his voice changed when he spoke. To someone he shouldn't have looked at that way. That someone was my baby sister. My name is Dana. I was 20 years old the night I left. Charles was 35. We met when I was just 18. I thought the age difference made me mature. I thought it meant he respected me more, not less. Charles was charming, thoughtful, the kind of man who pulled out chairs and remembered your favorite kind of tea. He made me feel like I was the only one in the room, until Amy came to visit. Amy was only 14, still a child in every way. My parents had sent her to spend the summer with us, because I lived in the city and they thought it would be good for her. Museums, movies, culture, big sister time. I was thrilled to have her. I missed her. And Charles was welcoming, too welcoming. At first, it was subtle. He complimented her outfit, a simple sundress. "Wow, you're growing up fast," he said with a smile that felt just a shade too long. Amy looked down, blushed. I didn't think much of it. He was just trying to be nice, wasn't he? Then came the second comment. "You'll be breaking hearts in no time." My stomach dropped. It was a joke, maybe. Maybe. But the third time? There was no mistaking it. We were in the kitchen, Charles pouring her a glass of juice, and he said, "If I were your age, I'd be all over you. You're hot." Amy froze. Her smile vanished. She looked at me, searching my face for a reaction. I stared at him, stunned, heart racing. "What did you just say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Charles laughed. "Oh, come on, it's a joke. Don't be so uptight." A joke? The man I was supposed to marry just told my 14-year-old sister she was hot. And when I called him out, he told me to lighten up. In that moment, something in me snapped, or maybe it finally aligned. 1,000 little things rushed into place. The way he'd comment on young women's appearances, the way he'd talk over me in front of his male friends, how he seemed less interested in me the older I got. But I didn't yell, I didn't fight, I just watched him, quiet, calm, and I knew what I had to do. That night, while he slept in our bed, I stayed on the couch with Amy, pretending to watch TV. I held her hand while she cried, while I bit down on my own. By morning, I'd be gone. I used to think falling in love meant stepping into something safe, something certain. But with Charles, love felt like a cliff. You didn't step into it, you jumped. We met at a bookstore near campus. I was in my first year of college, still clumsy with my independence. He was 15 years older, confident, composed. He knew what wine to order, how to talk to professors without sounding nervous. How to make you feel like the smartest person in the room. At 18, that was intoxicating. He asked me about the book I was holding, something poetic and moody I didn't really understand. But he listened like I was reciting Shakespeare. He offered to buy me coffee. I said yes. I didn't tell my parents at first. I knew what they'd say. He's too old, too fast, too everything. But he wasn't pressuring me. He was patient, kind, always asking how I felt. He said I was wise beyond my years, and I believed him. By the time I turned 20, we were engaged. Looking back now, it's easy to say I was too young. But when you're that young and in love, you don't see your own immaturity. You think you've found someone who sees the real you. And in a way, Charles did, but not the version of me I wanted to become. He saw someone easy to shape, someone who would trust without asking too many questions. He moved me into his apartment in the city, a sleek, quiet place in a high-rise with too many mirrors and not enough warmth. I filled it with candles and blankets, tried to soften the sharp edges. I didn't mind the way he controlled things, what groceries we bought, how we organized the cabinets, which side of the bed I slept on. I told myself he was just particular, that it meant he cared. He started talking about wedding venues. I started picking colors. Everything looked good on paper. I had a ring, a plan, a man who brought me roses every other Thursday. But something always felt fragile. Like if I said the wrong thing, the room would crack. He never yelled, never hit. But silence from Charles was a punishment. He could go hours, days, without speaking to me if he was displeased. When I asked what was wrong, he'd say, "You know what you did, even when I didn't, especially when I didn't. Still, I didn't leave. Because that's how it works. Little by little, you give away pieces of yourself. You let things go. You adjust. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've bent so far, you can't stand up straight." That realization came slowly. But then Amy arrived. My parents had called in early June, asking if I could take her for a few weeks. School was out, they were dealing with work stress, and Amy idolized me. Of course, I said yes. She came with her suitcase, stuffed animals, and a sketch pad full of doodles. She was still so young, giggling at cartoons, leaving socks all over the floor. I loved her for it. It reminded me of who I was before Charles, before I measured every word before speaking. At first, Charles was distant, polite but uninterested. Then gradually, something shifted. He started offering to take her on errands, asking about her favorite movies, sitting just a little too close on the couch. I told myself he was trying to bond, that he was being supportive. I needed him to be, because the alternative, the idea that my fiancé might be looking at my baby sister with something other than familial affection, was too sickening to believe. But deep down, I knew. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. That's when the whisper of betrayal began. Not in words, not even in actions, just a feeling, a cold, creeping certainty. And the sense that I was running out of time. It started with a compliment, just one. Harmless if you weren't paying attention. Amy came into the kitchen one morning in a striped cotton dress, one she'd had since last year. She was barefoot, hair still tangled from sleep. Charles glanced up from his coffee and smiled. "Well, don't you look all grown up?" he said. Amy mumbled thanks and grabbed a banana. I remember thinking it was weird that he even noticed what she was wearing. But I told myself not to overthink it. He was just trying to be polite. Then came the second time. We were heading out to a little art exhibit. I was fixing my lipstick in the mirror while Amy twirled behind me in a sundress. It wasn't particularly revealing, just bright and summery, the kind of thing a teenager might wear to feel a little more adult. Charles looked her up and down and said, "If I were 15 again, I'd be begging you to go to the dance with me." I laughed nervously. "You mean when you were 15? He raised an eyebrow. "I said what I said." Amy looked confused, a little uncomfortable. I watched her retreat into herself, that shy glance she used when she didn't want to be rude but didn't like what she was hearing. That night, she asked to sleep in my bed. I thought maybe she had a nightmare or was homesick, but she didn't say anything. She just crawled under the blanket, curled up, and faced the wall. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I held her until she fell asleep. And then came the third comment. We were making breakfast. Amy had asked for orange juice, and Charles poured it for her, standing close. Too close. I was washing dishes, pretending not to watch while watching everything. He handed her the glass and said, "You know, if I were your boyfriend, I'd never let you out of my sight. You're hot." Amy blinked. Her hand jerked, and the juice sloshed onto the counter. He laughed. "Relax, it's just a joke." My hands froze in the soapy water. I turned off the tap. "What did you just say?" My voice was steady, but my heart was thrashing. He looked at me, wide-eyed and incredulous, like I was the one being inappropriate. "It was a joke, Dana. Don't be so dramatic." Amy had gone pale. She was staring at the floor. I turned to her. "Amy, go to your room for a minute." She obeyed instantly. When she was gone, I stared at Charles. I wanted to scream. To throw the glass he just handed her across the room, but I didn't, because somewhere deep in my gut, I knew I needed to stay calm. "You think that's appropriate?" I asked. He rolled his eyes. "It's not like I touched her." "She's 14. "And I'm joking," he snapped, finally showing the sharpness I'd always suspected was underneath the silk. There was a long silence between us. I remember thinking, this is who he really is. This is the man I almost married. I left the kitchen without another word, walked to the living room, sat down on the couch, and stared at the blank TV screen while the sound of dishes being cleared clinked behind me. Amy didn't come out of her room that day. She didn't speak much at dinner. She barely ate. Later that night, when Charles fell asleep, she crept into the living room where I was curled up with a book I couldn't focus on. "Can I sleep out here with you?" she whispered. I nodded. She sat beside me, legs tucked up to her chest. Then she said something that shattered me. "Is he mad at me? Did I do something wrong?" I turned to her, heart breaking. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong." Because I didn't like what he said, but I didn't want to be rude. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her tighter than I ever had. "I believe you," I said. And the terrifying part was how relieved she looked, as if she wasn't sure I would believe her. That's when I knew this wasn't about Charles anymore. This was about her. About making sure she never questioned herself like I had for 2 years. About making sure her first instinct wasn't to doubt her own discomfort just to keep the peace. Because I had done that for too long, no more. The next morning, I didn't speak to him. I watched him move through the apartment like nothing happened. Coffee, emails, Bluetooth headphones in, humming along to some jazz playlist. He smiled at me as he left for work, kissed my forehead like it was just another Tuesday. And I let him. But something in me had calcified overnight, hardened. I was no longer scared of losing him. I was scared of keeping him. Amy stayed curled up in bed most of the day. She didn't ask to go out. She didn't draw in her sketch pad. Her spark was gone, just like that, snuffed out. I sat at the dining table, phone in hand, staring at the wedding Pinterest board I'd been building for the last year. White dresses, eucalyptus bouquets, hand-lettered signs saying, "Welcome to our forever." I deleted it all. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Maybe because I was done pretending this was a real forever to begin with. Maybe because the pain had already happened, so quietly I hadn't even noticed until now. At 4:17 p.m., I texted my mom. "I need to come home. Can you pick us up tomorrow?" She replied instantly. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Number not even close. But I just wrote back, "I'll explain later." That night, I sat across from Charles at dinner and watched him chew like a stranger. How had I not seen it? How had I spent 2 years with this man, and only now did I realize I didn't really know him? He started talking about a client from work, something about a promotion, and I cut him off. "Do you think you said anything inappropriate to Amy yesterday?" He stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "You told her she was hot." He laughed again, that same dismissive, deflecting laugh that made my skin crawl. "I already told you it was a joke. I wasn't being serious." "You said if you were her boyfriend, you'd never let her out of your sight." His jaw tightened. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you said it." He pushed his plate aside, frustrated. "You're making this into something it's not." "I'm asking you a question." "No, you're accusing me," he snapped, "and it's insulting." I stared at him. "You know what's insulting? That you said something so wildly inappropriate to a child, and now you're acting like I'm the problem." His voice dropped to that cold, low register he used when he wanted to make me feel small. "I think you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. You've always been sensitive." That word, sensitive, made me flinch. He'd used it before. Every time I tried to draw a boundary, every time I brought up something that made me uncomfortable. It was his favorite weapon, the implication that I was too fragile to handle reality. Only this time it didn't work. "Do you hear yourself?" I said quietly. "She's 14, Charles. You're 35, and you thought it was funny to tell her she was hot. What do you think that makes you?" He didn't answer, just stared at me, and that was enough. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, started washing the dishes, not because they needed it, but because I needed the noise. I didn't want to hear him anymore. When he finally went to bed, I stayed up, folding clothes in silence. My hands moved automatically, shirt, jeans, socks, stack. One for me, one for Amy. By midnight, 2 suitcases were packed and tucked into the front closet. I slipped into Amy's room, curled up next to her, and whispered, "We're going home tomorrow." She turned to me, eyes wide. "Why?" "Because I love you," I said, "and I should have listened to my gut sooner." She didn't ask anything else. She just nodded and held my hand until she fell asleep. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear but clarity. A kind of cold peace had settled over me, the kind that only comes when the decision is final. I made a list in my head, what needed to be packed, what needed to be left behind, what I would never need again. The ring came off first. I placed it in the small porcelain dish on the bathroom counter, somewhere visible, somewhere deliberate. I wanted him to find it. By morning, I was already dressed. Amy was still in her pajamas when I whispered, "We're leaving soon. Quietly, okay?" She nodded without question. I handed her a bag and told her to pack only what she needed. "Don't worry about the rest," I said. "We're not coming back." I made breakfast like normal: eggs, toast, coffee, just how he liked it. I even smiled when he walked in. He didn't notice the difference. Or maybe he did, and assumed he'd won. He always thought silence meant surrender. He didn't realize it meant strategy. Amy stayed in her room, pretending to sleep in. I told Charles she wasn't feeling well. He barely looked up from his phone. By 11 a.m., my mom texted that she was downstairs. I didn't even hesitate. "Amy," I called softly, "let's go." We wheeled our suitcases down the hall as quietly as we could. My heart beat hard in my chest, not from panic, but from control. I had never been more sure of anything. We passed the kitchen. Charles was still at the table, scrolling through emails. He didn't look up. Good. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't give him the dignity of a confrontation. He didn't deserve it. The elevator doors closed behind us with a soft chime. I felt the air change. I felt the tension lift from Amy's shoulders. My mother's car pulled up at the curb. She got out, eyes full of worry. "What's going on?" she asked. I looked at her, then at Amy. "Let's just go," I said. "I'll explain everything when we're home." We drove in silence for a while. Amy leaned her head against the window. I stared straight ahead. At home, I finally told my parents what happened. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father stood up so fast, the chair screeched across the floor. I thought he might drive back there himself. He said what to her? "Don't," I said. "It's over. We're out." "But the police." "He didn't touch her, and she doesn't want to talk about it again. She just wants to feel safe." And that was the truth. I didn't need revenge in the way most people imagine it. I didn't need to scream at him, or post about him online, or ruin his career. I just needed to make sure he couldn't touch my life or my sister's ever again. I changed my number, blocked him on everything, deleted every photo, took myself off the lease, canceled the wedding, called every vendor, returned every gift. Every action was a quiet, deliberate strike. No explosions, no drama, just the slow, clean unraveling of a life I never wanted again. I didn't even respond when he finally texted me 3 days later. "Where are you? You're being ridiculous. Call me." I read it once, then deleted it. Let him sit in the silence. Let him wonder when, exactly, he lost control. The first night back home, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed him, but because everything was quiet. No footsteps outside the bedroom, no checking my tone, my volume, my expression. Just silence. It felt too big, like my life had been emptied out. Amy fell asleep quickly in her old bed. Her breathing was soft even. I sat in the hallway just outside her door for hours, watching the sliver of light from the nightlight pulse against the wall. She was safe. That's all I needed for now. The next day, the phone calls started. Some were from mutual friends, others from acquaintances. People who'd seen our engagement announcement, who thought they knew us. "I heard you left Charles. What happened? Are you okay?" "He's devastated, you know." A few were sharper. "Wasn't that kind of extreme? Why didn't you just talk to him about it? Maybe he didn't mean it the way you took it." Each question felt like a slap, as if what I'd done wasn't love, but hysteria. As if leaving a man for what he said, not what he did, wasn't good enough. I didn't explain it to most of them. I didn't owe anyone the story. But late one night, my cousin Jenna called. We were close growing up. and she'd always been more like a sister than a relative. She asked softly, "Do you want to talk about it?" I told her everything, for the first time, fully. The comments, the way Amy had looked at me, the silence that followed. And Jenna didn't interrupt. She didn't doubt. When I was done, she said only this: "Good, I'm glad you left." I started to cry then, not from pain, but from relief. Someone believed me without a footnote, without a counterpoint. Amy, too, began to come back to life in small, tender ways. She asked to go to the library. She drew again. One night, she crawled into bed next to me and whispered, "I feel like I can breathe here." And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about ending an engagement. It was about breaking a cycle. For years, I had mistaken Charles's control for strength, his charm for character, his silence for peace. But now I saw it clearly. He wasn't a protector. He was a predator in disguise. And he'd almost fooled me. Almost. There was still grief. Not for him, but for the time I'd lost. For the younger version of me that needed so badly to be chosen. She didn't stop to ask by whom. There were nights I missed the routine, the illusion of security. The way he used to read the newspaper aloud, or always remember to restock the oat milk. Stupid things. But then I'd hear Amy's laugh echo down the hall, or see her run barefoot through the backyard with our dog, and the grief would melt into something else, something stronger. Gratitude. I didn't save the world. I didn't drag him through court or out him to the public, but I drew a line in the sand and stood by it, without spectacle, without apology. And in doing that, I saved us. People talk a lot about starting over, like it's this grand gesture, a dramatic haircut, a move across the country, a job change. But mine wasn't loud. It was slow and small. It looked like late-night walks with Amy, ice cream runs on Sundays, cleaning out old clothes that reminded me of who I tried to be for someone else. I went back to school part-time, picked up a job at a local coffee shop where nobody knew me as Charles's fiancé. They just knew me as Dana, the girl who made really good cappuccinos and always wore sweaters, even in the summer. I started journaling again, not the flowery kind I used to do in high school, but sharp, clear reflections. I wrote about what I had missed, what I had ignored, and why. I wrote about Amy's face that day in the kitchen, the moment everything snapped into focus. She became my compass. Every time I second-guessed myself, I thought of her. I thought of the trust in her eyes when she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" And the sacred responsibility of answering, "No, you didn't. He did." That was my redemption, not revenge, not retribution, just a promise to protect. Amy still draws, and every so often I see her sketch something that looks like the apartment we left behind. But now she draws doors wide open, curtains blowing in the wind, light coming in. I think that's what healing looks like, when the shadows are still there, but they don't define the space anymore. They just remind you where not to go. People ask me now if I regret it, walking away without warning, ending everything without giving him a chance to explain. And here's what I tell them: you don't negotiate with a fire when your house is burning. You get out. You grab the people you love and you run. Then, when you're safe, you decide how to rebuild. I didn't leave to destroy him. I left to protect someone who didn't even know she needed protecting. I left because I saw the future, mine and Amy's, and I refused to let it be shaped by someone who twisted trust into something unrecognizable. There's strength in silence, in boundaries, in exits that don't slam the door, but lock it permanently behind you. So no, I don't regret leaving. I regret ever thinking I needed someone like him to feel whole. Because now I know better. Wholeness isn't something someone gives you. It's what you become when you choose yourself. And mean it. If you've ever walked away from someone who made you feel small, just to protect someone else, drop a "they" in the comments. I want to know your story. And if you think silence can be powerful, share this with someone who needs to hear it.